Vladimir Putin intensifying his assault on the people of Ukraine, not the military, the people, and unleashing a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions. But even in the hardest hit, Mariupol, Ukrainian forces are refusing to hand over their city to the Russian army of terrorists. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here with me, my co-hosts Emily Compagno and Kayleigh McEnany. Also joining us today, Lauren Simonetti and Brian Kilmeade, the hardest working man in television. Always so good true. To have everybody. This is brand new video out of Kherson. We had just gotten this in a few moments ago. It is the first major Ukrainian city that fell to Putin. They're still there. They're still there. They fell to Putin. That wasn't enough. So maybe Mariupol gets this right. You don't surrender because he continues to kill you. Russian troops opened fire to disperse a crowd, we're now told, of Ukrainian protesters. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials in the strategic port city of Mariupol have rejected Russia's demands to wave the white flag of surrender. The United Nations says 10 million Ukrainians have been forced out of their homes, either displaced in the country or fleeing to other nations. This, as we learn, the United States reportedly has credible information that Russia is compiling a list of Ukrainians to be killed or sent away to camps. Jeff Paul, live for us in Western Ukraine. Jeff.
Yeah, Harris, the numbers from the UN are staggering, and they are growing by the day. They say around 10 million people have been forced to abandon their homes from right here in Ukraine, where they are moving to western cities like where we're at here in Lviv for safety. Another 3.5 million have left this country altogether, where around 2 million of that number have crossed into the border of Poland. And a huge factor that is driving this humanitarian crisis and refugee crisis is that more and more Russia appears to be targeting more civilian areas like theaters, apartment complexes, and as we saw last night, a shopping center. Ukrainian officials say at least 8 people were killed after Russian forces launched a rocket into a mall in Kyiv. The blast was so intense it destroyed cars parked outside and sent shrapnel into surrounding homes. One resident who lives nearby says it's difficult to put into words all of this destruction.
It's hard for me to speak because my child used to work here. She was at work just yesterday, and that thing happened yesterday evening.
Now, Russia recently demanded Ukraine essentially surrender the city of Mariupol, but the mayor of that city quickly shot down that threatening offer. Russian forces have encircled the city, where troops continue to bombard the area. City officials say at least 2,300 people have died in the city, but hundreds of thousands of other people within the city are struggling to get out and remain trapped because it simply is just not safe to get out of that city to somewhere else. As a result, many cities around Ukraine are strengthening their curfews. We know here, just outside of here in Kyiv, to the east of us, the mayor there has extended the curfew starting at 8 o'clock tonight, and it's going to run through Wednesday morning. We here in this city in Lviv, it starts at 10 o'clock, runs through the morning hours. And, you know, throughout the morning, we've heard air raid sirens, just a constant reminder that this entire country is at war. Harris?
Jeff Paul, thank you for that detail on what hit that mall. It did so much destruction, and I think it's now time to lean in even further and figure out what they're using. Jeff, thank you very much. Brian, I say that because, you know, there's been a tick up of kind of the world's accounting of where war crimes have been committed. But isn't Putin telling us? I mean, he's using hypersonic weaponry, and that's something that we haven't even successfully been testing.
As General Perkins, 4-star general, said this morning, you don't need hypersonics. It's a total show. It was ridiculous. And to him, what he says with the intelligence he's gotten, it shows how low they're getting on flat-out armaments. They don't have the precision weapons. They have the hypersonics supposed to take a look at this. If you want that, if you don't want that, then surrender. And I also think that you have a situation where Russia's in a second phase. I think, Harris, we have to get over this idea that he cares about war crimes. We have to get over this idea that he cares how he's viewed or history views him. He only cares about one thing, the expansion and sovereignty of Russia and reforming to the best he can the Soviet Union. Nothing else matters. We have to stop judging him by our criteria. Things that would bother us don't bother him. We have to assess our enemy accurately. The fact is he's aiming for artist studios. He's aiming for theaters. He's aiming for schools. He loves to hit hospitals. He's rounding up civilians and bringing them to concentration camps, for lack of a better term. He's making them sign agreements, according to 2 or 3 accounts, that say you will work for free for the next 2 or 3 years. So this is a fight for the free culture and free Eastern Europe for the foreseeable future. We have to make sure we don't lose. And if you look at Mitch McConnell says, why doesn't President Biden think about this? The Ukrainians can win this. I'll change that. Ukrainians have to win this.
Lauren, given everything that Brian has just said about what's at stake for the world, certainly for Ukraine, how would you describe what's happening in NATO right now? I mean, the president reportedly having this long phone call with several NATO allies. He's going to Brussels and potentially Warsaw, the capital of Poland. I mean, it seems like he's still herding cats.
And maybe this should be the call to more European countries that now is the time to join NATO, or Finland, for instance.
Well, they want to.
Well, yeah, but they also don't want to escalate the situation and might not want to do that right now. Their paperwork has been approved, for lack of a better term, but, you know, maybe show a stronger alliance that, you know, what you're doing, Putin, is not right, and we won't stand for it. We are united right now. And what we're seeing, and Brian was talking about this, is that this war is in the next phase. And that started with the escalatory nature, and maybe out of desperation, but with the hypersonic missiles, right? Putin has no care, no concern for how many civilians die here. What, you know, let's say he takes part of Ukraine, right? Let's say he takes the south, or they split the country in half and he gets something. No concern for having no infrastructure in these places and completely having to rebuild and having governing a people that want nothing to do with you. He has no concern for any of that.
Rebuild? Look at Aleppo in Syria. He doesn't care about that. You know, Lauren is right about, and so is Brian, that we've kind of gotten into phase 2, that the problem is Putin is a step ahead because he never had any compunction about killing innocents. Why would we ever think that? If you even only had like a postage-sized picture of Syria and you didn't even know half the story of all the people who were killed and tortured there, tortured by being bombed incessantly, it looks just like this.
Tens of thousands of civilians killed in Syria, that's the estimate, because of Russia. So yes, you're right. The past is precedent for what is going to be the future, is what we're seeing now. But Brian and Lauren raise a key point. Vladimir Putin has never cared about what the world thinks of him. And twice I've heard the White House press secretary say, once in regard to the Taliban, the next time in regard to China, they'll have to decide their place in history on the world stage. China's waging a genocide against the Uyghurs, where we've seen the abortion rate skyrocket there, forced abortions of a people group, and the birth rate decline. China doesn't care what the world thinks of you. They don't care about being associated with Russia. They only care about being associated with Russia because Russia's losing. They don't care about the inhumanity of Russia. Russia doesn't care about inhumanity. When you have Vladimir Putin strutting on a stage in a $14,000 jacket while you have Russian troops dying in morgues, tens of thousands being loaded onto trains in the middle of the night through Belarus, dead bodies.
And I interjected right there with the word genocide in terms of what China is doing. That's why we diplomatically didn't go to the Olympics. But clearly we'll call them and say, can you side with us and not help out Russia? Clearly we'll say to Russia, can you side with us and do a deal with Iran? I mean, it almost sounds like we don't know our enemies from our friends. Like we just can't tell.
It's thousands of Russian troops, I should have said. Yes.
Emily.
Right, and as we talk about these bloody escalation that has been happening recently, I think it's really important to note sort of the reason why, and that's frankly that Russia is in a stalemate. And the stalemate is not between Ukraine and Russian forces, it's addressing the gains that Russian forces have not had. And as precedent again has shown us, stalemates are extremely violent and bloody because that's when the aggressor starts utilizing these bloody options, which is targeting civilians. This is when they engage in even more brutal tactics. The U.S. Institute for the Study of War points out the fact that World War I, the battles of Somme, Verdun, and Passchendaele were all fought in conditions of stalemate. They were excruciatingly bloody. They targeted civilians, and they didn't break the stalemate. They point out that Putin was surprised, 1, by the unification of the globe against him, and 2, by Ukraine resistance. He is now digging in his heels. And so just to sum up, I fear that this stalemate and this violent phase that we are in, targeting civilians, I don't know what will stop it other than, again, steel. Our steel.
Quickly, I want to wrap the segment with Brian. Brian, I don't know how it has been for you, but every place I go, people are talking about this. And whatever they may have thought politically, people are in one lane about it hurts to watch it. What needs to be communicated to the White House? And nobody wants to go to World War III, but we're 26 days in. We didn't have to be at the spot, did we?
We didn't, and we should have got those arms there quicker. I know you're up against the break, but I'll just add this. I understand the theory about not getting our people involved directly. Just know, if Russia prevails, it's a matter of 5 years. It's going to be much bigger than that. We're all going to be involved, every NATO nation. Number 2, real quick on what's happening. If you don't want to get involved and you want them to win, you got to find a way to get those weapons in quicker. And a big symbol and a big lift up would be the MiGs. You get those MiGs in country and flying, that would be the shot of adrenaline the Ukrainian fighting force deserves.